It says, okay. All right, we are here. I've got Arama Rata, independent Maori researcher. I've got Carl Za, host of the Silk and Steel podcast. Arama's the host of a future podcast as well. We have begun our campaign to make her a podcaster as well. And we have so much to do, you guys. We have so much to do. But Carl, before we do anything, we have to hear about your trip to Russia. You went. Putin personally financed your trip to Russia. He gave you the Kremlin talking point. He updated you on all the Kremlin talking points to add to the CCP talking points that you usually engage with. How was that? What was that like?
It was great to be a double agent, I tell you. You get to double the pay.
Were you paid in rubles? The ruble's so strong.
And I can tell you, how I survived the Prigozhin coup in Moscow. Oh my God, yeah. I was there on that day. I woke up.
You had to get one of those T-shirts. I survived.
And all I got was this Lassie T-shirt. Yeah.
I'm gonna have my wife print that shirt. Actually, now that's a good idea. I'm gonna have my wife make that shirt.
Yes. Like one of your selfies, one of your Moscow selfies, and then and the caption is like, "I survived the Prigozhin coup, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt." I might find
good idea.
I could wear that. I could wear that to work one day, and just see what happens to me. Okay, yeah. So what was it? You were on TV. You were on Russia Today a lot.
I went to their studio in Moscow because they invited me before my trip, and I told them, my schedule is going to be tight, but I'm going to be in Moscow because I'm traveling to Moscow. They're like, come down to our studio, and we'll send a car to pick you up at your hotel. I'm like, okay, great. And so I got to see how the whole Putin propaganda machine works from the inside. No, it's great. It's great. They're very professional. And on the day I was supposed to go to my second, I went on RT like 3 times, but my second interview on the day I was scheduled to go, I woke up around I think 6:30 in the morning because I was still on Indonesian time, and then I woke up to a text message from my cousins, from my friends, from my cousins in China. From my friends in US. They're all asking, Carl, are you safe? Are you okay? I'm like, Moscow is a very safe city. I feel very safe. They're like, no, you don't understand. There's a coup. I'm like, what? There's a coup? They're like, yeah. Have you heard the Wagner launch a coup? I'm like, wait. There's so many internet rumors. Let me verify some facts first, right? You guys probably heard some wild rumors on the internet. And then I got on Twitter. I had to get on VPN because Twitter is blocked in Russia, Twitter and Facebook. And then I saw, oh my God, there is a coup going on. And then the second thing I try to find out, where is it taking place? Because people are saying like there's tanks in Moscow. I'm like, what? And then I saw somebody say, hey, relax, people, this happened at Rostov-on-the-Don, which is 13 hours drive from Moscow. So I'm like, phew, okay. And then just to make sure, I was in my the 11th floor hotel lounge, and then they have a little balcony area that overlooks the Kremlin and the Red Square. So I went to the balcony area. I took a little short video. Everything seems normal. There's not that many people because it was Saturday at 7 o'clock. But there's no tanks, no army personnel. You can still see tourists who woke up early still walking around, in front of the Red Square area. So I'm like, okay, so there's no need to panic. And the Russian Today people, they still arrived to pick me up. Originally, I was supposed to talk about something related to China. I think maybe Blinken trip or something. And instead, they want me to comment on Prigozhin coup. I'm like, okay, I'll try to give my 2 cents. But I try to talk to the RT staff, and most of them seem pretty calm. So I'm like, okay, they're not panicking yet, so I don't need to panic. And And then after I figured out where and right after that, the Putin gave his speech, official speech, and they showed me the full English translation. So I'm like, okay, well, it's pretty obvious that Putin already call it a treason, call it a coup, and the dude is still like 13 hours away from Moscow. So I gave my spiel. I said, like they asked me how I think about Prigozhin. I'm like, look, that's not the way I would do it. I would sneak into Moscow under the cover of darkness. By the time I'm sitting in the Kremlin, I'm gonna announce some change in management, right? I'm not gonna do it 13 hours away from Moscow when I have to cross a whole stretch of open terrains without air support, right? And then so I thought everything is fine. And after that, my tour guide, everybody sounded very calm. So we went to see a concert that evening. We went to see.
Can I just say, as far as coups go, I'd say like the trucker convoy and the protest that we talked about last time, Arama, might have been a bit better organized than Prigozhin's coup. At least they were already in the capital, when they announced their desire to overthrow the government.
Yeah, I mean, like the people. I mean, people were going nuts on Twitter, right? I mean, there's like a Twitter space that Elon Musk tweeted out, and all these armchair generals in US are talking about regime change. Putin is. There's rumor like Putin already seek political asylum in Turkey, or yeah, like you guys are crazy.
Turkey.
He's like right. I just right there across the me.
Putin will never take us.
And it was just so ridiculous how people who. And that's why I realized all these reporters on the mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, none of them are like even within 800 kilometers of Moscow. Like all are either reporting from like Latvia or Kiev. And so it's a great opportunity for me. I went down because my hotel is really close to Red Square, so I went down the stairs, went to Red Square, took a selfie photo of myself, and make a short video. So
that's gonna be on the T-shirt.
I'm Paul, and I'm live at the Red Square, and there's like a bunch of Russian down. And like there's a bunch of Russian tourists and there's like Chinese, Indian tourists all walking around, So it's like I say, everybody just took it very easy. I talked to a Russian man in the hotel. He's like, "Don't worry, this is just like some people in the top fighting over. We Russian people are used to it. Things will blow over in a week." And he was more excited to talk about his coming trip to China to go see Shanghai. So and he said, you look at this hotel. You see all these people running around. Like if there's a real danger, all these people will be gone. Like they're all rushing out the door, right? See, like right now it's not a problem. So I went to see a Russian concert. I went to see the Russian folklore choir play. It was played under the basement of a cathedral it's a new cathedral that built after the collapse of Soviet Union, and it was great. Right after the end of the concert, around 9 p.m. in the evening, my tour guide said, "Oh, I received a message. It says there was a negotiation and the situation has been resolved. Prigozhin is going to Belarus." I was like, "Okay." That was when I posted my RT interview on YouTube. Some of the comments says, Carl Za's podcast lasts longer than this coup.
That's right. They do. Okay. We should pivot. Oh, you want to say more?
No, that's my harrowing experience in Moscow.
Well, in that case, like Obama, we're gonna pivot to Asia. Huh? See what I did there? You guys see what I did there? Because I wanted to gather our three minds together to address the problem of containing China, right? Because that's what we all have in common. Carl is Mr. America. I'm Mr. Canada. And
I'm the only person you know from New Zealand, so I get to be here too.
but like, you're not only the only person I know from New Zealand, you're the only person I know from like New Zealand, Australia, and like, you know, Oceania, the entire Pacific. So you get to represent, yeah, you get to represent all the settler colonies of the whole region. So yeah, but like you're about to go on a tour. You're about to go on tour.
Yeah,
with
we're
an
on tour. I'm
You're
in
on
an
tour.
Airbnb at the moment. Yep.
This
So
is
we're
a
on
tour. So
Yep.
you're on tour against AUKUS.
Yes, we are.
You have taken a stand against AUKUS.
We sure have.
So you are the resident expert today on AUKUS. So tell us about give our listeners your spiel about AUKUS.
Sure. Yes, so for those who don't know, AUKUS stands for Australia, the UK, and the US, and it's this.
Which is unfair to Canada.
That's right. We were left out.
And then we would be CAUKUSZians or Caucasians.
Yeah, because if Canada joined and then New Zealand joined at the end, you'd have Caucasians. So, and that would just be like, yes, just call it what it is, right? The Caucasians Pact. So New Zealand and Canada are both like really salty that we didn't get invited into the big boys club. But New Zealand and Canada are both considering joining the pact on what's called Pillar 2. So Pillar 1 is centered around the acquisition of nuclear-propelled submarines. Pillar 2 is being sold to us as a pact to allow us to share information, but it really, as one of our speakers on tour last night, Nikki Haga, who's New Zealand's Justin Podur, I think.
Oh God! A scatterbrained.
Well, okay. The only thing you have in common is that
South Asian.
What's that?
A scatterbrained South Asian halfwit.
No, I actually only said that because you both wrote a book on our country's participation in Afghanistan.
Okay.
But some people describe him as New Zealand's best investigative journalist, but I think that's too fair, too gracious and accommodating to other so-called investigative journalists. So I just call him our only investigative journalist.
Nice.
Yeah. But what he was really clear about in our event, we had this amazing event at the Samoa House Library in Tamaki, Auckland, and we had like just representation from like really, really young people who looked like they just got changed out of their school uniform and came to this event, you know, right through to people in their 70s who were really active in the nuclear free and independent Pacific movement in the 80s, early 80s was kind of the peak. So we had this lovely exchange, but Nikki was really, really clear that this is not it's actually got nothing to do with information sharing. We're already doing that. What this is explicitly a pact to gang up against China, basically, just like the Quad and all of these other alliances that the US is busy making. And he talked about, and he like read from documents showing that when the US is talking about this on their own, it's all about China and the threat of China, and that being the fact that China exists makes it a threat. So he was kind of cutting through a lot of that bullshit, but a lot of people on the streets have never heard of AUKUS. I think they've intentionally given it a really, really bad name, so people just like switch off as soon as they hear it. So because not many people have heard about it, but when you start talking to anyone, you talk to anyone about it, whether that's like a kindergarten group, like a group of mums who are from a kindergarten, or just whoever you speak to on the street, as soon as you start talking about it, people get it immediately. They think it's a terrible idea. And so this speaking tour is all about trying to raise awareness that that the New Zealand government is thinking about this, and to make our opposition to this really, really strong.
So a couple of things. One is like, this is about nuclear submarines being based in Australia, right? Like that's what's new about it, because it's like a US and Australia and UK being of one mind on foreign policy isn't exactly a stretch, right? Like
but it's a big shift. And if you haven't checked out Paul Keating's press club interview on this, please watch it. It will restore your faith in humanity.
Did you see that, Carl?
So go ahead. What's
Did
your
you see
question?
that? I want to know if you saw that Paul Keating press conference that Arama just mentioned. He was kind of like, this is the guy who was like talking about why the New Zealand should stay out of it, right?
So
Is that
he
the
was
one?
talking about because he's a former Australian Prime Minister and
Oh,
a Labour Party
oh,
guy too, through
yes,
and through.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
he
yeah.
he said so clearly, like, I've got to put my country before the party, and you guys have just lost the plot. Like, you've made so many great decisions in the past, but on this is he described it as the worst deal in all of history, because Australia is paying 360 to 400 billion dollars. It works out at about $30 million every day for the next 30 years to get 8 nuclear-propelled submarines. And worse than that, these are not even useful for the defense of Australia. They're only useful for sitting off the coast of China to try and contain China and prevent their second strike capability. So that if nuclear war were to happen, it would stop China being able to respond to a nuclear attack. So it's just got nothing to do with protecting Australia. It's got nothing to do with protecting New Zealand. In fact, it just ramps up militarism, makes the region more dangerous, and kind of, yeah, puts a target on our countries as well.
They're literally doing that parody video from Australia's Juice Media from maybe like 5, 6 years ago. You know, there was a famous viral parody video where they do like the Australian defense minister meeting, and the Australian prime minister says, "Okay, what are we doing here?" They say, we are we're here to maintain an open and free Indo-Pacific. Okay, but specifically, what are we doing here? It's like we are guarding our trade route. Okay, our trade route. Who's our largest trading partner? China? Yeah, China. Okay, so we're protecting our trade route
with China from
with
China.
China from China, and everybody nods like yes, yes. The thing is, so I just a few days ago I watched this YouTuber with large following, Johnny Harris, who used to do Vox explainer videos, and he actually talked about this, but except he was totally whitewashing, the U.S. involvement, and he positioned it as way, oh, we are. Johnny Harris is American, so he said we are giving away our nuclear secret technology to Australia for free. I'm like, people in his comments like, no, we're Australian, we're paying for this, we're paying $365 billion for this. And the thing is, it's totally not, as Arama says, it's totally not for Australian defense. The whole deal is because Australia is buying these nuclear submarines, so Australia have to construct a port in Perth in Western Australia to accommodate these nuclear submarines. So after the port is built, you will host U.S. nuclear submarines. So this is a sneaky way for U.S. to get Australia to build a nuclear submarine base for them, while paying for it, while paying for the privilege of hosting U.S. nuclear submarine on their soil. I mean, it's a great deal for U.S. I mean, like, yeah, sure, they give up. I mean, but according to Johnny Harris, sure, they gave the nuclear technology freely to Australia for $365 billion, deal. Because Australia won't get those nuclear submarine until like 2030, right? And in the
Well,
meantime, U.S. get to use the naval base. But go ahead, John.
do
Just.
either of you guys remember? Because when this all started, when AUKUS was first announced, I remember the one party in the world that was really upset by it was France, because it was supposed to be fuck us. And then all of a sudden it was AUKUS, right?
So disappointed.
And they didn't even tell France that they were dumped. They just had to find out about it on social media.
It's a branding opportunity. I mean, that would have been a great brand. Very memorable.
But do you know those details, Adama? Do you know like what happened? Like Australia was gonna buy submarines from France?
Yeah, they were
Or
going to buy billions and billions of dollars worth of submarines from France, and they were actually better submarines as well. Uh, but then, they just
okay.
announced the deal with the US without letting France know. Yeah,
I
so France
mean,
were really really angry about it.
Yeah,
But
it was
France kind of deserved it
Australia.
though, right?
I still want focus though. I mean, that's just such a great.
yeah.
And
That's
so originally Australia was supposed to buy these diesel submarines from France, conventional submarines without nuclear power, and they had this deal ongoing for many years. Like Australia already paid a huge sum of money for those submarines, but US somehow convinced Australia to drop France and hook up with US. So Australia is now on the hook to pay France reparation for reneging on the deal while paying even more for these nuclear submarines that won't get delivered until 2030 from US. In the meantime, Australia get to build this nuclear submarine base in Perth, so the US nuclear submarine fleet can park in Australia for free. I mean, basically that was the deal. But man, focus, that would have been great.
we're all sad we missed out on that, aren't we?
Yeah, one other thing to say about it, in terms of like what's so new about it, is that Australia is not a nuclear power. Is not a nuclear power. They don't have any nuclear weapons of their own, and so they don't have the technology to actually maintain these submarines either. So that's why one of Paul Keating's points was that that it's an erosion of Australian sovereignty, because they're not going to, as Carl mentioned, this is just going to be basically a US military base, and US now being in control of their foreign policy even more. But it's a violation of the Treaty of Rarotonga as well. So it goes against the kind of intentions of non-proliferation, in that Australia has to increase its nuclear capabilities to be able to maintain these submarines. And it also, I mean, there's a lot of, one of the big problems with the Treaty of Rarotonga, which precludes nuclear weapons, but even storing or dumping nuclear materials. And one of the loopholes is that the US is allowed to kind of store, they're allowed to like bring in ships or aircraft and just not declare whether or not there are nuclear warheads on them. So there are already problems with this treaty, but what Australia is doing is really kind of flying in the face of that and their regional commitments to, because they're a member of the Pacific Islands Forum as well. So we're supposed to have Pacific-led foreign policy, and yet this is, just going back into these alliances with old colonial allies instead.
Yeah, and
Indo-Pacific strategic
there's already a base in Australia called Pine Gap, where U.S. hosts its military assets, and U.S. military has a full control over Pine Gap. So the Australian journalists can't even ask questions about what's going on inside the base, because that's a top secret for U.S. It's classified. Australians are not supposed to know what's going on in there. But all this is not enhancing Australia's security, as they claim. But on the contrary, it would just make Australia a target in the time of war. If you host nuclear weapons, weapon platform that's capable, that's nuclear missile capable, it's just gonna make Australia a potential target in a World War III scenario if U.S. goes crazy and decide to blow this whole thing up.
Yeah. And I think, again, we're unfair to Canada because Canada is also trying to blow this whole thing up. And I think Canada should get its due here, for its contribution to potentially, ending our brief, glorious tenure on this planet as human beings.
Yeah. Canada is Johnny come lately. Come on, Australia already got on with the program, like
I know.
from
So,
back in 2017.
so this is what happened.
I
Yeah, go ahead. You could go ahead, Carl.
Oh yeah, no. So I recently interviewed Peter Lee, who is a China watcher, and he has been tracking what U.S. Has been involved in Australia to fan the anti-China sentiment, to prepare the Australian public to accept paying billions of dollars for U.S. weapon platforms. And starting from 2017 and maybe even earlier, prior to that, because China is Australia's largest export market, Australia's largest customers, China-Australian relationship has been pretty good. So the U.S. basically identify Australia as the weakest link in the Five Eye networks. The Five Eyes
Hey.
is the
I think you're forgetting New Zealand, but carry on.
sorry.
Everybody always
Sorry,
forgets New Zealand, right?
New Zealand. Yeah.
Like,
so
we can be the
Australia
weakest
need to
link.
be well, after Australia got slapped back in line, Canada became next, right? But the deal was they started this whole Chinese interference in Australian politics scare in Australia back in 2017, and that lasted pretty much till now, and that act has done irreparable damage on the Australian-China relationship. And what I have been, amazed is how they just basically took that same model, and now they're doing it in your country, Justin, in Canada.
Exactly. So this is what amazing. So we started talking. We did an episode, Carl, a little while ago about the China Canada, like the China panic in the Canadian media, because I was covering this and I was just totally like, wow, is this ever? Do they ever want to get us all to hate China? Like they're so excited about this, and it was like when you look at it, because I started to study it very carefully, and it was like very small. Like there's like one source, maybe two, inside of the Secret Service of Canada, and they're leaking to two reporters at one newspaper and one reporter at another TV station, and those reporters become like really important on the national scene because they have access to this secret leaker, right? The secret CSIS leaker, and the secret CSIS leaker was like telling them that this politician met with the Chinese consulate and this politician said this, and they were by the way, one of those guys, Sam Cooper from Global Television, has left. He has left to pursue other opportunities. Nobody knows why, but one of the politicians that he said was responsible for keeping some kidnapped Michaels in jail in China sued him for defamation and the network for defamation to the tune of, I don't know, millions of dollars. And I think they came to some agreement that that Cooper would be, maybe we could watch for him on Substack or something. Anyway, Cooper's gone, but the other two are still there. Fife and Chase are still there at the Globe and Mail. But what amazed me was you were like, Justin, this all has happened in Australia already in 2018. And then I looked at it, and then there's this book that came out by David Brophy called China Panic, and I was like, oh cool, China Panic, like someone's written about Canada. It's not about Canada, it's about Australia. and then I'm like, okay, so there's a secret service in Australia called ASIO, and they leaked their stories there was a leaker in ASIO, and they leaked stories to a couple of journalists at networks. And then those leakers talked about Chinese interference, secret Chinese police stations, Chinese interference in research and science, and stealing intellectual property, and interference in politics. And then they had a inquiry, like Canada had this inquiry by this retired senator who was like, there's nothing here, sorry. And in Australia, the same thing. 2017, there was some inquiry by someone named John Garneau. Do you know this person, Arama, by any chance? Okay.
No.
You're not that granular expert in internal Australian baseball.
No, we don't have like the WeChat mind control thing happening.
The Indo-Pacific.
There's no other version.
Waves. So then. they did an inquiry which remains classified to this day, apparently. So it probably says there was nothing there either, right? Otherwise, why wouldn't they declassify it? There was but one of the strongest things in China Panic that I really liked about the book was he says, you know, everybody is screaming about Australia's sovereignty, the sovereignty of Australia being violated by China, and sovereignty is being violated by China. And he's just like, that's really interesting, because in Australia right now, there's a debate about indigenous sovereignty and about how all of Australia's land is actually indigenous land. And this whole thing about like Australia's sovereignty being violated by China is like a huge diversion from that debate, right? And that discussion. And that's you know, that I thought that was like really good that he caught that, because for me, every time I hear like these people talking about, you know, China interfering in Canada, I'm like, what is Canada though? Like, are you talking about interfering in the project of colonizing and stealing indigenous land? Because isn't that what you know, isn't that what Canada is? So I don't know. I mean, how does that question come up in your AUKUS tour? Are you guys talking about that?
Yeah, I think one thing that obviously we notice a lot and have to kind of get ahead of to help people recognize it is just obviously the greenwashing of militarism, but also what we call sometimes here brownwashing, so brownwashed foreign policy or brownwashed militarism. So, you know, if they're gonna build a massive if we ever did get a nuclear submarine, it would probably be called Tangaroa, the god of the ocean, or some shit like that, you know.
Yeah.
So they
Absolutely.
they do this whole thing about, you know, protecting our poor natives and stuff. And you know, you kind of see that in Taiwan as well, like people framing Taiwan as like a indigenous sovereignty movement or something, you know. And it's like we're not really hearing the voice of indigenous folks in Taiwan, and so I think
you care about indigenous folks in Taiwan, do you? I see.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and also just picking up on because I think like this conversation is framed around Canada and Australia copying each other. So I don't have a lot to contribute to this conversation. I didn't do the homework. I didn't do the assigned reading. Sorry, but what I can provide, what I can provide as the actual weakest link in Five Eyes, undisputed.
Let's fight for that. Let's fight for the
what
title.
I can provide is the really kind of, like we talked about how there's the copying of the copy of the copy. So by the time we do it, it's just really bumpkin examples of all of these things. And Carl, I don't know if you saw this, but New Zealanders are really, really upset with China because apparently China stole our kiwi fruit. Did you hear about that?
What? Like, is this in Australia? I mean, how China steal New Zealand's kiwi? Like, explain it to me. I mean, this is something brand new to me. I'm willing to.
Okay, this is just like so steeped in racism. So, so do you know what the kiwi fruit was originally called in the West? The Chinese gooseberry.
Chinese gooseberry?
Chinese gooseberry. So it's a Chinese fruit that we stole fair and square. Okay. So you know, China, you know, a civilization that's freaking thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. We go over there, we take this fruit, bring it back here, and then we develop our zespri freaking variation. So we have purple ones and yellow ones, and I think it's about the yellow ones. So some Chinese business person took some of the plants back, and now China are growing these fruit that have like trademark protections over them and stuff. And New Zealand is outraged. And when people point out the fact that these fruit came from China, the response is, no, but we improved them. This is our intellectual property. So there's the assumption that for all of the thousands of years that this fruit existed in China, no one made it better in any way. So that's New Zealand's contribution to China Panic.
The
Wow. That's amazing to me, because the kiwi fruit is actually native to where I'm from, my part of China, in the southwestern part, Sichuan. We call it mihou, which literally means monkey fruit. And then it was and what I heard, the story I heard, how it got transformed. So it was transplanted to New Zealand, I think, in the early 20th century by missionaries. And the story I heard, how it the name shifted from Chinese gooseberry to kiwi fruit, is because New Zealand, they tried to market it in United States. And yeah. They don't, they don't want to sell. Nobody wants Chinese gooseberry. So like but kiwi, which is actually a bird indigenous to New Zealand, they thought that was great branding for this for Chinese gooseberry. So that Chinese gooseberry became kiwi. That's the story. But wow,
can I read you guys?
I did not know it was such a great debate, controversy about kiwi.
I want to read you guys some of the quotes, because Brophy quotes this novel from 2019 called Bruni, and the plot of the novel is that basically China is slowly taking over the land of Australia, starting with and they deport the white people to an island. And so one of the characters asks herself this. She goes, "Is this how the Aborigines had felt, I wondered? All these foreigners arriving and not leaving again, taking up residence, making homes in all the best places, establishing their own rules, making you beholden to them until you were worth nothing."
Wow.
Wow.
Well, I mean, this is like the projection. I mean, I used to say a lot of the talking points in the West about China is 100% projection, but yes. I did not expect to take it that far. I mean, they're literally they have to make themselves the victim. They're the real victims here. It's not the indigenous people of Australia. It's them. They are victim of potential possible Chinese invasion that may happen sometimes in the future. We don't know when, but they're definitely.
Yeah.
So I watched this. I saw this YouTube video from John Mearsheimer. I don't know if you watch a lot of his stuff, but it was can China rise peacefully? Right? So I thought, okay, cool, I'll check this out. And he comes out and he categorically says, no, it can't. And now I'm going to tell you why. And then to describe why there is no way that China could possibly rise peacefully, his evidence is to look at what the US have done since 1700.
Oh my God.
And he says, so he's according to the way that he views it, when they just want to game it out, these strategic studies guys, they love gaming things out. And for them, they always come to the same conclusion. But that's fucking coming from their own cultural frame, And he says that he visits China a lot, and he shares his theories on strategic studies in China, and the people that he meets there, they're like, oh, we're really, really interested, but what about economic what was the phrase he used? Codependence, basically, economic prosperity for all. What about that? Couldn't that be how we approach this? And he's like, no. Categorically.
I came to China to tell you no.
John Mearsheimer is actually really, really good when he comes to analysis of America, of US, because he understands how US works. But the thing with a lot of Americans, talking about the rest of the world, is they assume the US value is, of course, a universal value, right? We all subscribe to the same set of rules. So this must be how everyone else thinks and how everyone else must act. And that's the premise. And that's where, and also this whole fear of Australia being taken over by like some yellow horde. This has been persisting since like its existence, right? Because like, and also I just don't get it. There's a big country just between China and Australia. There's Indonesia, right? Like, how the hell is China gonna leapfrog over this gigantic continental sized country, Indonesia, to invade Australia? I mean, like, it's yeah, it's
Yeah,
just mind-boggling.
if the Chinese hordes are gonna overflow, they're gonna overflow into Australia. But like nobody ever, I mean, into Indonesia, but nobody ever thinks of that, like, because it shows you how racial that would just be yellow people spilling over onto yellow people, so that doesn't even really count, right? Well, there's another thing about Mearsheimer where like he gave a speech to Australians, right? Where he was like, I feel kind of bad for you because, it would make sense for you to have good relations with China, but we're not going to let you. So too bad. Have you guys seen that one? You've been watching a lot of Mearsheimer. He's got a speech like Arama like Australian like elites or something, where he's just like, yeah, he's laughing about it. He thinks it's hilarious. He's just like, yeah, obviously it would be really great if you guys could just take China's side, but of course we're not gonna let you do that.
Yeah, he said you will see how nasty we can be as Americans, and everybody in the audience just like cackle like very nervously, like because they understand that's the truth. I mean, he's speaking the truth. The U.S. would actually carry out on its threat of keeping Australia in line, and now that they have done and they have AUKUS, now it's Canada's turn, Justin. It's Canada's turn to join the CAUKUSZians, the Caucasian Alliance.
So the other thing they do is there's this quote. He's kind of quoting like some other racist Brophy is, and he says the person he's quoting says Australians need to set aside their xenophobia and get on with tackling the CCP. So, and that's like the China thing too, right? The China thing in Canada, they're like, Canadians are like these two reporters. It's like somebody made a joke on Twitter where they were like, all the people that are trying to stir a China panic in Canada could fit into a phone booth. Like, it's an incredibly small number of people, and they're all just screaming as loud as they can, and nobody in Canada really gets it. Everybody's just like, well, we're supposed to hate China now? Why? They manipulate our elections? But our elections are between the same two jerks. Like, what do we do? They have the same policies. They all do the same things. Like, what difference did China make?
That's a good observation, because right now in U.S., of course, it's election season, so anti-China rhetoric is all that's the latest fashion, and there are two presidential candidates right now. They're basing their entire presidential campaign platform on the anti-China rhetoric. I'm talking about Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, these guys.
Can I just interrupt you, because that's also brown? You mentioned brownwashing, Arama, and brownwashing in Canada is like Indian people bashing China in the name of Canadian values. So it'll be like they're invading our democracy and they're interfering in our government, and then the name of the guy is like Singh or like Ramachandran or something.
I even forgot Nikki Haley is Indian, because she changed her names, it's interesting because Nikki Haley and Vivek, despite their rhetoric, if you look at their actual polling numbers, they're in single digits. So like even all this anti-China rhetoric, which they hope they could propel them into the next level in the presidential election, it's not helping. It's not helping because, well, of course, because right now every other U.S. politician is also anti-China. So how do you distinguish yourself, right? And so
I'm really anti-China. Yeah. There's also like anti-indigenous intellectuals who have taken up the China panic. So it's like there's this kind of nexus of like you're a public intellectual in Canada whose like job is to question the existence and the oppression of indigenous people, or Australia. And so it's just like the parallels are incredible. So we have this guy named Thomas Flanagan who wrote a book called Aboriginal Rights and Wrongs. And his whole thing is like to go back over history and be like, well, there were not as many Native people as you think. They killed each other a lot. Most of the bad stuff that happened, they did to themselves. Blah blah. Yeah, all of he just combines all of that. And then I discovered that there's also like a Keith Windschuttle in Australia, who wrote a book called The Fabrication of Aboriginal History. So it really is like. There's like a meeting somewhere where they like, where they're like, okay, have you got one of these guys? Have you got two reporters? Have you got two networks? And they just go down the line. And even the percentages of Aboriginal people in prison is the same. So like in Australia, 28% of the prison population is indigenous, and they're 3% of the Australian population supposedly, according to their statistical body, and it's 4% in Canada and 28% of the prison population. Where it's like, did they decide in advance how many? Like, I don't know. It's just the way the numbers come out. It's like,
yeah, it's across all settler colonies. It's just one way of dispossessing people is to keep them in prison.
But how do they get the percentage so exact? Like,
what's the calculus?
This is what makes me a conspiracy theorist.
There's definitely this kind of convergence of like anti-China and anti-indigenous racism here as well. Recently, because we, as I say, like we do this watered down bump conversion of what's happening elsewhere. So elsewhere, there's like all of these concerns around foreign interference with elections. Here, and anytime there's a campaign donation from a Chinese person, it kind of becomes suspicious. Well, our race relations commissioner he's a very interesting person. His story is quite fascinating. He rose to national awareness through his role as the mayor of a small town. So he's a Chinese man, Ming Fun is his name. And it was a very, like half of the population there is Maori, and he was the first mayor in New Zealand who could speak te reo Maori, our native language. So he kind of used Maori culture to progress his own political career, and then he became Race Relations Commission after. And I mean, like, for me, people go like, oh, wow, we've got a Maori speaking mayor, but for me, it's just, it's messed up. We'll just put it that way. It's completely messed up that the first person who could speak Māori who managed to be a mayor was not Māori, especially given the fact that he's probably about 10% of all Chinese people who can speak Māori. So you've got a 1 in 10 chance of being a mayor if you're Chinese and you can speak te reo Māori in New Zealand, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, he was our Race Relations Commissioner, and he gave some like a campaign donation to a Māori political candidate, and she ended up being his boss, and he didn't declare that. And so this is not a story, right? This is not a story, but this became like this national story because there were two racialized people, so it was easy to just kind of hate on both of them. And then he also didn't declare something else, and he had to resign as our first race relations commissioner for as long as I can remember, and maybe ever, I'm not sure, who was not white. And he got fired or had to resign under these, I would say unfair, because he was placed under unfair scrutiny. But there was no race relations commissioner to say that it was racist because he just resigned.
Yes, that's right.
It's like
yeah.
It's like in U.S., right? We say, U.S. has no corruption. We just have campaign financing, right? Mm-hmm. But as soon as a Chinese person to participate in the campaign financing, we suddenly woke up, oh my God, that's corruption. That is corruption and election interference, right? When everybody else does it, it's fine. It's just campaign financing.
And what is?
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Go. No, you go.
I was just going to say, and what's so interesting as well, often when you actually look at what is happening, like in this particular case, it was happening. There's like this cultural reason why Chinese people in New Zealand will donate to political candidates, and they usually donate to both sides. And in this case, they donated to both sides, but that is just kind of left out of the story until like, you know, a few days later when everyone's kind of forgotten, or they just keep going back to the original headline, even though we now know, no, he actually, this is not showing that he's politically biased because he donated to both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, with Canada,
that's actually a feature. Yeah, that's actually a feature, not a bug. They come out with some outrageous story, you know, like some China bad story, and then like maybe a month later, after that original story has already gone viral, become a meme, like the China social credit story, right? Everybody now know about China social credit. And yeah, right, or the spy balloon, and then after like a few months, there's a disclaimer. Oh, actually, that's a non-story. But nobody read the disclaimer because the disclaimer is not the one that's to get decimated widely. So everybody remembers the original report, which is totally bogus, and that's how they work. I mean, the media still claim, oh, we done our due diligence. Look, we report a story and then we follow up on it. But in actuality, they're just propagandizing to the public. You know, that the public only remembers the first misreporting, and then that's all people know. The spy balloons, and now U.S. is saying, oh, the spy balloon actually didn't spy. So isn't it just a balloon?
But it's still, exactly. A regular. It's a weather balloon. Come on.
I want to talk about the media a little bit more. But there was a point about I lost it, but it was like in Canada. Yeah, in Canada there was this increasing desperation where they reported they were like, well, the Chinese consulate, someone in the Chinese consulate paid for a bus that brought Chinese senior citizens to polling booths on election day, and everyone was like, okay, we don't care. Right? And so they were just like, well, okay, if you don't care about that, how about this? And then eventually it got to the point where they were like, this liberal politician told China to detain these arrested Canadians longer so that it would help the Liberal Party electorally. And then that was the thing that the guy sued over, because he was like, first of all, that makes no logical sense in any world, and second of all, I didn't do that, so I'm gonna sue you. And then the newspaper, I don't think it was the newspaper, it was Globe that reported it. They eventually said, well, we didn't mean, they're trying to say like we reported that the person said it. Like, we're reporting that the CSIS guy said that. We're not reporting that it happened. They're trying to get out of it that way. It's just like, so
it's like when I first heard that story, I'm like, why would China support Liberal Party? Why would China support the Trudeau? Why would China support Trudeau's party? It doesn't make sense. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But you've got a China panic in the New Zealand media too, a little bit.
Oh, it was a Russia panic.
Oh, Russia panic. Those are just as good. Those are good.
I guess there's a China panic too. Well, I think it's just interesting because like people point out, they write stories about how Chinese media in New Zealand is just full of propaganda for the CCP. Carl, why should we be saying CPC? Can you explain that to me? And then I'll get back.
Yeah. So the official name is the Communist Party of China. I guess, but I don't understand what the difference is. The other one which the critics like to use is CCP, which is Chinese Communist Party. But some people object because everyone use CCP almost like as a derogatory term now. So there are people objecting using CCP, and they say they should use the official name, which is CPC. The official name is Communist Party of China rather than Chinese Communist Party. That's
okay. So the people who would talk about this story then would definitely say that the New Zealand Chinese media is just full of propaganda for the CCP, and then also recently there was this big story. The headline was pretty much saying there's a Russian spy in our national broadcaster, the Radio New Zealand, RNZ, because somebody had discovered that some of the international stories that were coming through were being edited slightly. And it was framed in the media as though this was outrageous. You're not allowed to touch the text of these stories that come through, but you absolutely are allowed to. You just have to put it in the byline or something. And what he was doing was he thought that he was changing the stories in a way that would make it more relevant to New Zealand readers, or more in line with what New Zealand readers would be expecting. So they were tiny. They were so tiny that it took someone in the US 2 years to even notice that he had done it a few times. I think there were I don't know, a couple of dozen instances of it or something. But there are people out there today who would have seen the headline who would genuinely believe that there is a Russian spy in our national broadcaster who's been changing stories. And even worse than that, it just completely obscures, or the starting point of that argument is that this international news that we're receiving is not biased,
Right. It's pure, clean.
All right, guys. It's a official Russian propaganda channel now. Look at this is my art. I got paid. This is my pay from Putin. This is what I collected for my RT appearance. A coffee mug.
That is good. That is so good. Okay, so where's your tour going next, Arama? Tell us about the rest of your tour.
Oh yeah, so the next thing that we've got is a 2-day workshop for history teachers. So we're going to teach them we're going to work with them to talk about the best ways of teaching the nuclear free and independent Pacific movement, because the way that it's usually framed is really whitewashed as a history of yay, New Zealand stepped in and became nuclear free and saved the Pacific. And they forget the independent part of the nuclear free and independent Pacific movement, which is about a decolonial movement. And we're actually starting that on the anniversary of the bombing of the Rainbow Warrior. I'm not sure if that's something that's known around the world, but the Rainbow Warrior was a Greenpeace vessel that would sail into the Pacific that was being used to oppose testing of nuclear weapons. That, there are still many, many people today who carry the legacy of those tests in their, really poor health outcomes. People having babies with defects or who weren't able to survive, just really, really horrific things. The Pacific is still poisoned from that time. But anyway, the Rainbow Warrior, this Greenpeace vessel, had been used for that. And French secret agents came in, bombed it. And it actually killed a Portuguese photographer named Fernando Pereira. And so, so the first day of our little workshop coincides with that anniversary, and so we'll be having a commemoration after the first day for the sinking of the Rainbow Warrior, and we're trying to invite different people from different movements together to kind of connect our local struggles with the broader regional movement for a nuclear free and independent Pacific. And then we're heading down to Christchurch. We've got this amazing anti-fascist hero of mine, Sina Brown Davis, who will be speaking in Dunedin, and then we're heading back to Wellington to close off the tour. And we've already had some invites from cities Tauranga and also from Christchurch, so we may have to extend our tour because we're so popular already.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And you should record all this for your future podcast. Yeah.
Oh.
You can record all these.
Okay, for the record, there's no future podcast.
We'll see.
As we're taking our tour on the road, doing these serious speaking events in the evenings, we're dressing up as AUKUS against AUKUS. So it's AUKUS against AUKUS. Only works in the New Zealand accent, I think. So don't try that. Don't try saying that at home. But we're in the evenings we're arguing with drunkards about AUKUS and educating the people in the old way. Part of what we're doing is we're putting our old school activists who had awesome successes in the 60s and 70s with their movements and the 80s, and putting them in conversations with the new up and coming activists today. And they always say, our older generation always tells stories of going to the pubs, to taking petitions into the pubs. And the story usually includes, I only got punched in the face once. So we haven't been punched yet. I hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, I think there's something to be said about arguing with drunk people about your
geopolitics.
Yeah.
Okay, that is great, and so all of our Pacific listeners should go to this tour, right? Regardless of you know.
Oh yeah, you could. Yeah, if you. Oh, our kaupapa is called. Our project is called Matika Hawaii. So Matika means rise. So rise Hawaii, and Hawaii is our ancestral homeland. So yeah, if people are here, they'll be able to Google Matika Hawaii and find us that way.
Awesome. Okay, before we go, Carl, should we talk about a couple of these visits? Janet Yellen, Joseph Borrell. Janet Yellen says there's going to be consequences if China doesn't reform, right? I'm sure China's shaking in their boots.
It's interesting because I wonder what they say in the private, because what has been released to the public with the Janet Yellen's public speech during the China visit is that China should not, China should abide by the free market rules, right? She's talking about the latest Chinese restriction on the rare earth elements that's used to make semiconductor chips, right? Which is a response to the U.S. sanction on China, the advanced semiconductor chip sanction on China. But Janet Yellen is saying, look, China, you don't get to do this. But then in the next sentence, he said, well, U.S. reserves the rights to, we actually want to do business with China. We don't want to interrupt the trade. But we have, we have to reserve the right to limit our export based on national security reasons. So what she's essentially saying, U.S. is right to restrict semiconductor sale to China, but China should not restrict the sale of rare earth elements that used to make the semiconductors, which is completely ridiculous. It's like,
I love two things about that. The first thing I love about it is how the free market is the best and most efficient system, but it's cheating when China doesn't use the free market, and it's an unfair advantage. But if the market's the best, there shouldn't be a way to get an unfair advantage by planning or interfering with the market, right? And then the other thing I love about it is how the U.S. military-industrial complex needs stuff from China to fight China. I think it was Lockheed Martin or someone, right? Where they were like, we can't make stuff without Chinese parts and metals. It's gonna be weird. Yeah. It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be a weird war when it finally happens.
Yeah.
And then the other one is Borrell. I'm just so tickled. I don't know if you saw this, Arama, but the guy from the European Union who said the rest of the world is a jungle and the West is a garden, and sometimes the garden has to go to the jungle, otherwise the jungle will overgrow the garden or whatever. So he was gonna go to China, and China just canceled the trip. They didn't even say why. They were just like, yeah, maybe later.
Joseph Borrell, though, he's also on record of saying that European military needs to send their warship into Taiwan Strait. Oh. I mean, yeah, that's probably the comment that really tickled off Chinese government. It's like, why are you coming here? Why should we listen to you?
Oh gosh. All right. Well, this was fun, you guys. Can we do this again? Will you come back?
Yeah. Let's make a regular CAUKUSZians.
Can we get someone from France?
Yeah, we need.
Oh yes.
I also don't know. I also don't know anybody in France, honestly.
Well, yeah, it's a bit too far for me to rip there too. Sorry, so.
But any French people listening to
Yeah.
Volunteer yourself.
We need you. Allons-y. Allons-y, chéries.